Spring 1941, North Atlantic, 400 miles east of Newfoundland, where the black water runs deep and cold enough to kill a man in minutes. USS Kearney cuts through the darkness at 30 knots, her bow throwing spray that freezes before it hits the deck. Below, in the cramped sonar room, a young operator named Miller hunches over his equipment headphones pressed tight against his ears, listening to the ocean's secrets. Ping, ping, ping. The sound travels out into the void, searching, probing, hunting for the shape of death lurking somewhere in the depths. Contact bearing 090, range 800 yards. The words crackle through the bridge intercom. Captain Morrison snaps upright in his chair. 800 yards. Close. Too close. The convoy is just 2 miles behind them, 40 merchant ships carrying food and fuel and ammunition to a Britain that's running out of time, running out of everything. Full speed ahead. Battle stations. The alarm screams through the ship. Men scramble from their bunks, pulling on clothes, grabbing life jackets, running to their posts. In the sonar room, Miller's hands are steady on his controls, but his heart hammers against his ribs like it's trying to escape. 700 yards, 600, 500. The pings come faster now, urgent, insistent. The submarine is there, right there, a steel whale moving through the darkness below them, setting up for a killing shot at the convoy. 400 yards, 300, and then silence. Complete, absolute, terrible silence. The submarine hasn't disappeared. It hasn't fled. It's simply too close. The sonar beam projecting forward and downward at its fixed angle passes right over the target like a searchlight aimed too high. At 300 yards, physics creates a blind spot that turns trained operators into guessers and modern warships into sailing vessels from the age of Nelson. Miller yanks off his headphones, his voice cracking as he shouts into the intercom, "Contact lost. Last known position bearing 090, range, approximately 250 yards. On the bridge, Captain Morrison knows exactly what this means. For the next 90 seconds, maybe longer, they will be completely blind. The submarine commander knows it too. He's been counting the pings, measuring the intervals, waiting for this exact moment. Morrison has no choice. He has to keep going, has to trust his training, his instincts, his guess about where that submarine is heading and how deep it's diving and how fast it's moving. He orders full speed ahead, charges forward into empty ocean passes over the point where the submarine should be. Drop depth charges. 12 cylinders roll off the stern, splashing into the Kearney's wake. Each one carries 300 pounds of high explosive and a hydrostatic fuse set to detonate at 200 feet. The crew counts seconds, hands gripping rails, eyes fixed on the roiling water behind them. 20, 30, 40. The ocean erupts. 12 massive explosions lift columns of white water 100 feet into the air. The shock waves travel through the hull, shaking the ship, rattling equipment, sending loose objects clattering across the deck. It feels apocalyptic. It feels like the wrath of God delivered in high explosive. It feels like they must have hit something. Captain Morrison watches the surface through his binoculars, searching for debris, for oil, for any sign that those charges found their mark. The water settles, the foam disperses, the ocean returns to its eternal indifferent rolling. Nothing. Down in the sonar room, Miller puts his headphones back on, trying to reacquire the contact. His screen shows chaos, debris, turbulence, temperature layers created by the explosions, all of it scrambling the sonar picture into useless noise. It will take 15 minutes, maybe longer, for the water to settle enough to see anything clearly. 15 minutes of blindness, 15 minutes of vulnerability. 3 miles away, the German submarine U, 203 levels off at 350 feet. Kapitän Leutnant Mutzelberg orders a course change to starboard, increases speed circles around behind the destroyer that just tried to kill him. He had 90 seconds of invisibility, 90 seconds of freedom. While that American ship charged blindly overhead, he used every second. Now he has a clear shot at the convoy. Fire 1, fire 2. 2 torpedoes leap from their tubes. Their electric motors whisper quiet, their courses converging on a fat merchantman silhouetted against the lighter western horizon. The SS Robert E. Lee, carrying aviation fuel from Texas to Liverpool. The first torpedo strikes amidships. The explosion tears through the hull, ignites. The fuel turns the ship into a floating inferno in less than a minute. The second torpedo hits while men are still trying to reach the lifeboats, seals their fate, ensures that most of them won't even make it to the water. 47 sailors die in the flames or drown in burning oil. 47 men who had families waiting for them, who had futures planned, who thought they might actually make it through this war alive. USS Kearney races back toward the convoy, but there's nothing left to save. Just wreckage and bodies and the sick, sweet smell of burning fuel oil that will haunt Captain Morrison's dreams for decades. The mathematics of this failure are brutally simple. Between September 1939 and this moment in March 1941, Allied warships have made over 3,000 depth charge attacks against German submarines. Confirmed kills, number 63. That's a ratio of 47 attacks for every submarine destroyed, a success rate of 2.1%, 97.9% failure. The U-boats are winning. Britain is starving. And 3,000 miles away in a laboratory at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. A man who studies how the human eye perceives color is about to do something the United States Navy insists is physically impossible. His name is Marcus Sullivan. He's not a naval officer. He's not a weapons expert. He's a chemist from Minnesota who once nearly burned down his neighbor's house trying to make colored fireworks in their attic. He knows more about photochemistry than any man alive can explain in elegant detail how photons strike the retina and trigger neural responses that the brain interprets as color. But he knows nothing about killing submarines. That's about to change because three things are going to happen that will transform this mild-mannered professor into one of the most important weapons designers of World War II. His nephew is going to die. The Navy is going to reject his idea for the third time in 30 years. And he's going to crash President Roosevelt's inspection tour because the United States military absolutely refuses to believe him. This is the story of the Hedgehog anti-submarine mortar. This is the story of how one stubborn American fought his own Navy's bureaucracy just as hard as he fought Hitler's U-boats. This is the story of a weapon so effective that when a single destroyer got its hands on it, the ship sank 6 Japanese submarines in 12 days, a record that stands unmatched 80 years later. They told him his idea was impossible. They told him it had been rejected 3 times over 3 decades. They told him that even God Almighty couldn't get a spigot mortar approved by the Ordnance Board. Marcus Sullivan built it anyway. February 21st, 1904. Small town Minnesota population 843, where winter means 6 months of snow and temperatures that make metal brittle and men careful. Marcus Frederick Sullivan enters the world during a blizzard that shuts down the town for 3 days. His father, Pastor Edmund Sullivan, performs the baptism himself 2 weeks later in the small Lutheran church on Maple Street. The congregation numbers maybe 40 on a good Sunday. Farmers, mostly hardworking people with calloused hands and simple faith. The Sullivan family has no money to speak of. Pastor Edmund serves God faithfully, but earns barely enough to keep his wife and growing children fed and clothed. They live in a small house behind the church, 4 rooms, and a root cellar heated by a wood stove that Edmund feeds through the long Minnesota winters. But Marcus's mother, Ellen, has something more valuable than money. She has determination carved into her bones, forged in the same Scandinavian stubbornness that brought her parents across the Atlantic to this frozen prairie. She resolves to do the very best for her children despite circumstances that would make weaker women despair. Young Marcus is different from other children, and everyone notices. While other boys play baseball in the vacant lot behind the general store, Marcus disappears for days at a time. He loads a small rowboat with supplies, brings his dog Copper, a brown mutt of uncertain ancestry, and vanishes onto Lake Winnibigoshish. Just him and the dog, and questions that adults can't answer and won't try to. He doesn't need other people. People just get in the way of thinking. At age 10, he reads every book in the town's modest library twice. At 11, he teaches himself basic chemistry from a textbook his mother finds in a church donation box. By 12, he's conducting experiments that terrify the neighborhood mothers and fascinate their sons. Jimmy Paulson's house on Elm Street becomes the unofficial laboratory. Jimmy's mother, a saint or a fool depending on who's telling the story, allows Marcus and his friends to use the upstairs room for their experiments. She sets 2 rules: no explosions loud enough to wake the neighbors and clean up your own messes. The boys violate both rules regularly. They mix chemicals in mason jars. They heat compounds over alcohol lamps. They create reactions that fill the room with colored smoke and acrid smells that seep through the floorboards and make Mrs. Paulson threaten to end the whole operation weekly. One winter afternoon in 1916, 12-year-old Marcus decides to create a colored flame for the upcoming 4th of July celebration. He's read about metallic salts producing different colors when heated: copper for blue, strontium for red, barium for green. He mixes chlorine compounds in a beaker, adjusts the ratios, applies heat. The beaker explodes. Not catastrophically, not enough to hurt anyone, but enough to fill the upstairs room with thick purple smoke and send 4 boys stumbling down the stairs, coughing eyes, streaming clothes stained with chemicals. Mrs. Paulson waits at the bottom with her wooden spoon face set in that expression mothers perfect over years of dealing with boys who think they're invincible. Marcus Sullivan, you could have killed everyone in this house. What were you thinking? Marcus wipes his streaming eyes, looks at the purple stains on his hands, considers the question seriously. Then he says something that defines the rest of his life, though nobody knows it yet. But I didn't kill anyone, Mrs. Paulson, and now I know exactly what not to mix. That's progress. Mrs. Paulson doesn't know whether to laugh or scream. She settles for making Marcus promise to stop experimenting in her house. He promises. He means it when he says it. 2 weeks later, he rebuilds the experiment in the barn behind his own house, adjusts the ratios, gets it right. The 4th of July fireworks that year include brilliant purple flames that make people gasp and wonder how young Marcus Sullivan managed something the professional pyrotechnicians couldn't. He's learning that impossible problems just need people stubborn enough to refuse accepting they're impossible. You try, you fail, you adjust the variables, you try again. Eventually, if you're smart enough and stubborn enough and willing to ignore people telling you to stop, something works. This attitude will serve him well when he's fighting German submarines. It will nearly get him court-martialed first. 1919. 15-year-old Marcus enters the University of Minnesota on a partial scholarship that covers tuition but nothing else. His mother makes it work somehow, taking in laundry, selling eggs, pinching every penny until it screams. His father prays and preaches and tries not to think about how his brilliant son might have an easier path if the church paid its pastors better. Marcus enrolls as a commerce student, accounting, business management, the safe route to steady employment. His mother's idea born from love and worry about her son's future in a world that doesn't always reward brilliance. He lasts exactly one semester before switching to chemistry and physics. The decision breaks his mother's heart and mends it simultaneously. She sees the light in his eyes when he talks about molecular structures and chemical bonds. She remembers the boy who disappeared onto the lake for days just to think. She understands even if she worries. Money remains desperately tight. Marcus works 2 jobs some summers, anything that pays, anything that gets him closer to the next semester. He scrubs floors in university buildings. He tutors wealthy students who struggle with basic mathematics. He helps Professor Dietrich set up chemistry demonstrations for undergraduate classes. In 1923, still an undergraduate, Marcus makes a decision that seems completely disconnected from his academic path. He joins the United States Naval Reserve, not from patriotism particularly, though he loves his country in the quiet, assumed way of men who've never had reason to question it, not from military ambition, not from any desire to serve in uniform or sail on warships or learn the ways of naval warfare. He joins because the Naval Reserve pays $30 a month for weekend drills and 2 weeks annual training. $30 a month means he can stop scrubbing floors and focus on his studies. $30 a month means security, independence, the ability to buy books without wondering if he can afford to eat. And because if he's honest with himself, he loves being on the water, always has. The Naval Reserve lets him sail on actual ships, learn navigation, understand the physics of motion through a medium that's simultaneously forgiving and deadly. Marcus Sullivan has no idea this casual choice will eventually position him to save the Atlantic convoys. He just wants to study chemistry without starving. By 1927, his academic achievements earn him something remarkable: an 1851 research fellowship to study at M1T, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, where the brightest minds in America gather to push the boundaries of human knowledge. The fellowship commemorates the Great Exhibition of 1851 and funds exactly one Commonwealth scholar per year. Marcus packs his few possessions, says goodbye to his parents and sister, boards a train heading east. His mother cries. His father grips his shoulder and says something about making them proud, making a difference in the world. Marcus nods and promises to write and feels guilty about how eager he is to leave. Cambridge, Massachusetts feels like another planet. Buildings made of brick and stone instead of wood. Streets crowded with people and automobiles. The Charles River winding through the city, nothing like the wild lakes of Minnesota, but beautiful in its own cultivated way. At MIT, Marcus studies photochemistry under some of the finest minds in the field, how light interacts with chemical compounds, how photons trigger electron transitions that release energy in specific wavelengths, how the human eye perceives color through chemical reactions in the retina that convert light into neural signals. The work fascinates him completely. He publishes papers in prestigious journals. He develops new techniques for measuring light absorption. He builds equipment that lets him study reactions at wavelengths previously thought impossible to isolate. By 1935, at age 31, he's associate professor of chemistry, youngest in the department. Colleagues whisper about a Nobel Prize before he's 50 if he keeps producing work of this caliber. Marcus Sullivan, the boy from Minnesota who nearly burned down his neighbor's house, has become Dr. Sullivan, recognized authority on photochemistry, respected scholar man with a brilliant future in pure research. And then slowly at first, the world starts falling apart. Marcus has one sister, Mary, 2 years younger. In 1922, she marries a school teacher named Robert Hayes, a good man from a good Boston family. They have a son in 1922. Name him Thomas. Robert Hayes. Everyone calls him Tommy. Tommy is everything young Marcus wasn't. Outgoing where Marcus was solitary. Athletic where Marcus was bookish. Popular where Marcus was odd. Captain of his high school baseball team, class president, boy with a smile that makes adults instinctively like him. But Tommy has his uncle's curiosity, his uncle's stubborn refusal to accept easy answers. Every summer from age 8 onward, Tommy takes the train to Cambridge and spends 2 weeks at Marcus's laboratory. Marcus teaches him chemistry, physics, how to think like a scientist instead of just memorizing facts. They develop a bond deeper than uncle and nephew usually manage. Marcus never marries, never has children of his own. Tommy becomes the son he didn't know he wanted, the connection to family he thought he'd left behind when he boarded that train east. Summer of 1939, Tommy shows up in Cambridge, tall and serious, no longer quite a boy, but not yet a man. He's 17, should be thinking about college applications and girls and what he wants to do with his life. Instead, he wants to talk about Germany. They sit in Marcus's office, windows open, to catch whatever breeze might find its way inland from the Atlantic. Tommy asks questions Marcus doesn't want to answer, about Hitler, about Poland, about whether America will get involved if war breaks out in Europe. Uncle Mark, if America gets into this war, I'm enlisting. Navy, like you. Marcus looks at this bright-faced kid who loves baseball and terrible jokes, who has his whole life ahead of him, and feels something cold settle in his chest. Tommy, this isn't our war yet. Britain and France can handle Hitler. You don't need to worry about fighting. Tommy shakes his head with the certainty of youth. That's exactly what they said about the last war, isn't it? And by the time we got involved, millions were dead. If we wait until it is our war, Uncle Mark, it'll be too late. Marcus can't argue with that logic. It's exactly the kind of reasoning Marcus himself would use following premises to their conclusions, regardless of how uncomfortable those conclusions might be. September 1st, 1939, Germany invades Poland, Britain and France declare war. Marcus watches newsreels of tanks rolling across Polish farmland, of cities burning, of refugees fleeing with whatever they can carry. Tommy enlists in the Naval Reserve. That December, 3 months after his 18th birthday, he writes letters full of enthusiasm about training, about learning to be a sonar operator, about feeling like he's doing something important. Marcus writes back with chemistry news and carefully doesn't mention how those letters make him feel. December 7th, 1941, Sunday morning, Marcus is in his laboratory working on a paper about color perception in low-light conditions when his department head bursts through the door without knocking. Sullivan turned on the radio. The Japanese just bombed Pearl Harbor. The world tilts. Marcus sits in his office listening to reports from Hawaii. Ships sinking, men dying, thousands dead or wounded. America's Pacific Fleet crippled in a single morning. By Monday, America is at war with Japan. By Thursday, Germany declares war on the United States. Tommy Hayes, now 19 years old, receives his orders on December 10th. Report to Norfolk Naval Station for assignment to Atlantic convoy duty. He calls Marcus from a payphone before shipping out. His voice sounds young and scared and trying very hard to sound neither. Uncle Mark, I'm heading out tomorrow. Atlantic convoys, destroyer escort. Marcus grips the phone receiver hard enough to make his hand ache. Be careful, Tommy. Please be careful. I will. And Uncle Mark, whatever you're working on in that lab, keep at it. We need smart people figuring out how to win this thing. The line goes dead. Marcus sits holding the silent receiver, listening to his own heartbeat, feeling the weight of everything that conversation didn't say. 2 weeks later, Marcus receives orders of his own. Lieutenant Commander Marcus Sullivan, Naval Reserve, report to Washington, D.C. for assignment to the Office of Advanced Weapons Development. His expertise in chemistry and physics has finally intersected with his reserve commission in ways he never anticipated. The Navy needs scientists who can think creatively about impossible problems. Someone in some office somewhere looked at his file and decided he might be useful. January 5th, 1942. Marcus walks into a Pentagon office still smelling of fresh paint and new construction. The building opened just 2 weeks ago, largest office building in the world, already feeling too small for the war effort expanding within its walls. Captain Daniel Reeves waits behind a desk covered in folders and maps and after action reports. 42 years old, former destroyer commander face that looks like it hasn't slept properly in months. Decorations on his uniform include a Silver Star for actions in the Atlantic before America officially entered the war. Dr. Sullivan, thank you for coming. I'll be direct because we don't have time for pleasantries. We're losing the Atlantic. Britain is starving. Our convoys are being slaughtered. Every week we lose 10, 15, 20 merchant ships. The Germans are sinking tonnage faster than we can build it. At current rates, Britain has maybe 6 months of food reserves left. After that, they'll have to negotiate surrender or watch their people starve. Reeves slides a folder across the desk. Marcus opens it, starts reading statistics that make his stomach turn. Since September 1939, Allied warships have attacked German submarines 3,174 times using depth charges. Confirmed kills number 63. That's a ratio of 50.4 attacks per kill, success rate of 1.98%. Marcus looks up from the folder. These numbers can't be right. Reeves's face hardens. They're right, Doctor. We're shooting blind. Literally. Every single attack, we lose sonar contact before we can fire. We're dropping depth charges on guesswork and prayer, and it's not working. Why am I here, Captain? Because you're a scientist who thinks creatively about problems. Because your file says you once invented a new technique for measuring light wavelengths that experts said was theoretically impossible. Because we need people who don't accept that things can't be done. Reeves stands, walks to the window overlooking the Pentagon's central courtyard. We need weapons that work, Dr. Sullivan. Not weapons that make us feel like we're doing something. Not weapons that look impressive. Weapons that actually kill submarines before those submarines kill our boys. Marcus thinks about Tommy somewhere in the Atlantic hunting U-boats with equipment that fails 98% of the time. I'll need to see a destroyer captain, talk to sonar operators, understand exactly where the system fails. Reeves nods. I'll arrange transport to Boston Navy Yard tomorrow. You'll have full access to USS Benson and her crew. 3 days later, Marcus stands on the forward deck of a destroyer tied up at Boston Navy Yard. The morning is cold enough to make his breath fog. Young Lieutenant Peterson, the ship's sonar officer, explains how the system works. The sonar projects forward and downward at a fixed angle, sir. We can detect submarines at 1,200 yards, track them as they maneuver. It's remarkable technology, really. And the minimum range, Peterson's expression changes. About 300 yards for a submarine at 100 feet depth. Closer than that, the beam passes right over the target. The geometry doesn't work. What happens when you lose contact? We charge forward at full speed, pass over where we think the submarine is, drop depth charges set to explode at whatever depth we estimate the target to be. Then we wait 15 minutes for the water to settle enough that sonar works again. What's your success rate? Peterson looks away. On this ship, 7 attacks, no confirmed kills. We think we might have damaged one target, but it escaped. 7 attacks, 0 kills. 1.9, 8% suddenly feels optimistic. The destroyer's Captain Commander Morrison, the same Morrison who commanded USS Kearney during that failed attack in March, speaks up. His voice carries the weariness of a man who's watched too many merchant ships sink. Dr. Sullivan, you seem like an intelligent man, so I'm going to be direct. This system doesn't work. We're hunting submarines with equipment designed for a different war. The depth charges explode whether they hit anything or not, blind our sonar alert every submarine in 50 miles that we're here. We're not hunters, we're noisemakers hoping to get lucky. Marcus stands on that deck, wind cutting through his coat, looking at these exhausted officers who've been fighting a losing battle with inadequate tools. Something clicks in his mind, the same feeling he got at age 12, staring at a chemistry problem nobody else could solve. The same intuition that's guided every successful experiment he's ever conducted. Commander Morrison, what if you didn't drop weapons behind the ship? Morrison looks confused. Sir, what if you fired projectiles ahead while you still have sonar contact before you reach that blind spot? The idea hangs in the cold air between them. Peterson speaks first. That's been proposed before, sir. The Ordnance Board rejected it 3 separate times over the past 30 years. Even if the concept works theoretically, they say it's too complex to implement practically. Morrison's expression is harder. Doctor, even if God Almighty himself walked into the Ordnance Board and proposed a forward-firing anti-submarine mortar, I guarantee you they'd find reasons to reject it. That's just how the system works. Marcus looks at these men, at this ship full of young sailors about to head back into the Atlantic. Sailors like Tommy. Then I suppose I'll have to convince them, Commander. Morrison almost laughs. Good luck with that, sir. You'll need it. Marcus returns to Washington with a clarity of purpose he hasn't felt since beginning his doctoral research. The problem is solvable. The physics work. The technology exists. Someone just has to build it and force the Navy to use it. He spends 2 weeks reading everything he can find about previous forward-firing proposals. All 3 were rejected for similar reasons. Too complex, too heavy, too unreliable. Too different from established doctrine. None of the rejections say the concept won't work. They just say it's too hard. Marcus Sullivan has spent his life doing things people said were too hard. He assembles his thoughts into a formal proposal. Forward-firing anti-submarine mortar. 24 projectiles fired in a pattern ahead of the attacking ship. Contact fuses that only explode on impact with a submarine, silent misses that allow immediate follow-up attacks. He estimates the system could improve kill ratios from 50 attacks per submarine to maybe 5 attacks per submarine, 10 times more effective. The proposal goes to the Ordnance Board in early February 1942. The rejection letter arrives 3 weeks later, polite, firm, absolute. The board appreciates Dr. Sullivan's enthusiasm, but must regretfully decline this proposal due to technical complexity and resource constraints already identified in previous reviews conducted in 1912, 1931, and 1939. Marcus reads the letter 3 times, feeling rage build in his chest like pressure in a sealed vessel. Tommy is out there right now, hunting submarines with weapons that fail 98% of the time. How many other Tommies are dying while bureaucrats worry about technical complexity? He takes the rejection letter to Captain Reeves. Reeves reads it, face darkening. I was afraid of this. Whitmore chairs that board. He's old school Navy, believes in battleships and big guns and doing things the way they've always been done. Anything new threatens his worldview. Can we go over his head to who the Ordnance Board reports directly to the Chief of Naval Operations? You'd need the President himself to overrule them. Reeves says it like a joke, like obviously that's impossible. Marcus doesn't laugh. When's Roosevelt's next inspection tour? Captain Daniel Reeves stares at Marcus Sullivan across the desk, trying to determine if the chemist is serious or having some kind of breakdown brought on by too many late nights in the laboratory. You want to intercept the President of the United States during an official inspection tour to demonstrate an unauthorized weapon that the Ordnance Board has explicitly rejected. Marcus meets his gaze without blinking. Do you have a better idea? Captain Reeves leans back in his chair, runs a hand through hair that's gone prematurely gray over the past 6 months. His younger brother died in the Atlantic just 3 weeks ago. Merchant Marine torpedoed south of Iceland, body never recovered. Reeves knows exactly what failure costs. This could end both our careers. Court-martial isn't out of the question. And if we don't do it, how many more ships sink while we wait for committees to have meetings about whether to schedule discussions regarding preliminary reviews? The silence stretches between them, filled with the weight of men dying in cold water, ships breaking apart in flame, a war being lost one convoy at a time. Reeves opens a desk drawer, pulls out a file. Roosevelt's scheduled to visit the Naval Proving Ground in Maryland on June 12th, observing tests of a new torpedo guidance system. My brother James is personal secretary to the president's naval aide. He might be able to get us 5 minutes. Might. Marcus feels something loosen in his chest, the first real hope since reading that rejection letter. 5 minutes is enough. If I can show him it works, 5 minutes is enough. First, you have to actually build it. Reeves pushes a folder across the desk. This is your budget for exploratory research, $6,000. Use it however you need, but understand this is off the books. If it fails, we were never having this conversation. And if it succeeds, then maybe we save the Atlantic. Maybe we give our boys a weapon that actually works. Maybe my brother didn't die for nothing. Marcus takes the folder stands. I'll need engineers. Good ones. People who can think creatively. There's a young lieutenant named Fisher. Weapons specialist, Annapolis graduate, brilliant with mechanical systems. He lost his younger brother on a merchant ship last month. If you can convince him this isn't a waste of time, he'll work around the clock. Where do I find him? Reeves writes an address on a slip of paper. Naval Research Laboratory building. 7. Fair warning, Sullivan. He's angry. Lost his kid brother. Lost his faith in Navy weapons. Lost his patience with officers who talk about problems without fixing them. Don't give him theory. Give him something he can build. February 9th, 1942. Marcus walks into Building 7 at the Naval Research Laboratory, carrying blueprints that exist mostly in his imagination and a determination that borders on obsession. Lieutenant Harold Fisher is 31 years old, thin in the way of men who forget to eat with oil stains on his uniform and shadows under his eyes that speak of too many sleepless nights. He's hunched over a workbench, disassembling what looks like a depth charge fuse mechanism. Lieutenant Fisher doesn't look up. If you're here about the propeller modifications, tell the Admiral they'll be ready when they're ready. Rushing produces garbage. I'm here about killing submarines. Marcus sets his blueprints on the workbench, actually killing them, not just making noise in their general direction. That gets Fisher's attention. He straightens, looks Marcus up and down. You're the chemist. Sullivan, the one who wants to build a forward-firing mortar after the Ordnance Board said no. Word travels fast. This is a small community, Dr. Sullivan, and most of us are tired of watching good ideas die in committee while bad ideas get funded because they don't threaten anyone's career. Fisher wipes his hands on a rag that's probably dirtier than his hands. So what makes you think you can build something that's been rejected 3 times in 30 years? Because I'm not asking the Ordnance Board for permission. I'm building it whether they like it or not, then making them watch it work. Fisher almost smiles. That's either the bravest thing or the stupidest thing I've heard all week. Show me what you have. Marcus spreads the blueprints across the workbench. The concept is straightforward. 24 spigot mortars arranged in a 6x4 pattern, tilted forward at 45 degrees. Fire them in sequence. Launch all 24 projectiles in under 3 seconds. They land in an elliptical pattern approximately 200 yards ahead of the firing ship. Fisher studies the drawings, his expression shifting from skepticism to interest. Spigot mortars. That's why the Ordnance Board rejected it. They think spigot systems are unreliable. Are they? Fisher shrugs. Not if you build them correctly. The British use spigot mortars for some applications. The principle is sound. You just need precise tolerances and good metallurgy. What about the projectiles? Marcus flips to another page. 65 pounds total weight. 35 pounds of Torpex explosive. Contact fuse that arms after the projectile sinks 15 feet, prevents premature detonation on water impact. If it hits a submarine hull, it explodes. If it misses, it sinks silently to the bottom. Fisher traces the projectile design with one finger. The fuse is going to be the hard part. Water impact generates massive force. You need something that can distinguish between hitting water at high velocity and hitting steel underwater. Can it be done? Fisher looks up and Marcus sees something fierce in his expression, something personal. My kid brother was 23 years old, engine room mechanic on a Liberty ship. U-boat torpedoed them south of Greenland. Most of the crew made it to lifeboats, but the engine room flooded too fast. David drowned in the dark while the submarine that killed him sailed away because our escorts couldn't hit it with 60 depth charges. I'm sorry for your loss. Don't be sorry, Dr. Sullivan. Just build something that works. Fisher extends his hand. I'm in. Whatever you need, whenever you need it, I'll make it happen. But understand this is personal for me. If you're wasting my time while more ships sink, I'll make your life extremely unpleasant. They shake hands. Marcus feels the calluses, the strength, the barely controlled fury of a man who needs to build something, anything that might prevent other families from receiving the telegrams his family received. How long until we can test a prototype? Fisher looks at the blueprints again, calculating. If we work fast and don't sleep much, 6 weeks for a functioning launcher. The projectiles will take longer. The fuses even longer than that. We have 4 months until Roosevelt's inspection. Can you do it? Fisher's smile has nothing to do with humor. Dr. Sullivan, I once rebuilt a destroyer's entire fire control system in 3 days because the captain needed it, and procurement said it would take 3 months, 4 months to build something that might actually win this war. Watch me. The next 16 weeks pass in a blur of 18-hour days, failed prototypes, midnight calculations, and the kind of sustained desperation that produces either breakthroughs or breakdowns. Fisher assembles a team, 6 engineers, all young, all carrying their own reasons for making this work. 2 lost brothers in the Atlantic. One lost a father, another lost his best friend from Annapolis. They work with the intensity of men who understand that every day of delay costs lives. The launcher problems start immediately. The first prototype tears itself apart during initial testing. The recoil forces are too much for the mounting system. The whole assembly shakes like it's trying to commit suicide. Fisher redesigns the mounts, adds reinforcement, changes the firing sequence. Second prototype works better, but the projectiles scatter across a pattern the size of a football field, completely useless for actually hitting a submarine. Third prototype, fourth, fifth, each one gets closer. Marcus watches these young engineers work through problems that would make most people quit. They adjust angles, modify timing sequences, strengthen weak points. They test and fail and test again with a persistence that reminds Marcus of himself at age 12 blowing up chemistry experiments in his friend's attic. By late March, they have a launcher that works. 24 mortars, 6 rows of 4, tilted forward at exactly 43 degrees. When fired in carefully timed pairs, the projectiles land in a predictable ellipse pattern measuring 140 feet by 120 feet at a range of 200 yards. One problem solved, 2 more to go. The projectiles themselves require precision that challenges the team's capabilities. Each one has to be aerodynamically stable in flight, hydrodynamically stable when it hits water, heavy enough to sink predictably, and contain enough explosive to kill a submarine on contact. After dozens of test versions, they settle on a design: 65-pound projectile, 7.2 inches in diameter, 46.5 inches long, tail fins set at a slight angle to induce stabilizing spin during descent, flat nose to ensure vertical sinking rather than tumbling, 35 pounds of Torpex explosive, significantly more powerful than standard TNT. The contact fuse nearly defeats them. Lieutenant Sarah Chen, one of 3 women working in the entire Naval Research Laboratory, takes on the problem with the methodical intensity of someone who's had to prove herself every single day since arriving. 28 years old, MIT, graduate in mechanical engineering, smarter than half the admirals in the Pentagon, and aware that most of them resent her presence. She explains the challenge to Marcus in the workshop late one night in April. The projectile hits water at terminal velocity, roughly 150 feet per second. That impact generates forces over 50 times gravity. Any normal contact fuse would interpret that as hitting a target and detonate. So how do we prevent that? Chen holds up a partially disassembled fuse mechanism. Arming delay. The fuse stays mechanically locked for the first 15 to 20 feet of descent. A small propeller on the nose spins during sinking, and only after sufficient rotations does it unlock the firing mechanism. By then, the impact shock has dissipated, and if it then hits a submarine hull, then the contact switch closes, current flows through the detonator, and 35 pounds of Torpex explode inside a confined pressure hull. Chen's expression is grim. It won't be quick, but it will be absolute. No submarine survives that kind of internal explosion at depth. How many test versions have you tried? This is number 37. The first 36 all had problems. Too sensitive, not sensitive enough, mechanical failures, corrosion issues, problems with water pressure affecting the arming mechanism. Will 37 work? Chen loads the test projectile into the firing tube they've set up at the proving ground. Only one way to find out. The projectile launches, arcs through the morning air, splashes into the test pool. It sinks smoothly vertically exactly as designed. 15 feet down, the arming propeller completes its rotations. At the bottom of the pool, a steel plate waits, positioned to simulate a submarine hull. The projectile strikes the plate. The explosion turns the test pool into a momentary fountain water erupting 30 feet high, the shockwave traveling through the ground hard enough to rattle windows in the laboratory building. When the water settles, the steel plate has a hole torn completely through it, edges peeled back like some enormous predator took a bite. Chen turns to Marcus, allows herself the smallest smile. Version 37 works, Dr. Sullivan. 3 problems solved. Now they just have to convince the President of the United States that this contraption is worth mass producing, while the Navy's Ordnance Board insists it's impossible. May 19th, 1942, Marcus receives a letter from Tommy. The envelope is water-stained, probably from spray on deck during the Atlantic crossing. The handwriting is rushed, shaky in places, nothing like Tommy's usual careful script. Uncle Mark, we're getting hammered out here. Lost 3 ships from our convoy 2 days ago. The U-boats hunt in packs, now coordinate their attacks, hit us from multiple directions. Our depth charges can't touch them. We fire and fire, and they just slip away. Yesterday, we tracked a submarine for 2 hours, got close enough to attack 4 separate times, dropped 48 depth charges, didn't hit it once. That U-boat sank 2 more merchantmen before we lost contact completely. The boys are losing faith in the equipment. Some of them think we're better off just running, trying to outrun the submarines instead of fighting. But we can't outrun them all. There are too many. I heard a rumor you're working on something new, some kind of weapon that might actually work. I don't know if it's true, but Uncle Mark, if you're building something, please hurry. We're dying out here. Good men, good sailors dying because our weapons don't work and theirs do. Stay safe. I love you. Tommy Marcus reads the letter 3 times, hands shaking slightly. He folds it carefully, places it in his desk drawer next to the growing collection of Tommy's letters from the Atlantic. Then he goes back to work, because work is the only thing that might save Tommy's life. June 10th, 1942. 2 days before Roosevelt's scheduled inspection, Marcus Fisher and Reeves load a Thunderbolt launcher onto a military truck in the middle of the night. Unauthorized, unsanctioned, possibly illegal, depending on how broadly you interpret regulations about removing government property from secure facilities. They drive it to the Naval Proving Ground outside Washington, arrive at 0300 when security is minimal and questions are fewer. Fisher has forged paperwork that claims they're delivering equipment for the scheduled torpedo demonstration. The security guard, young and bored, barely glances at the documents before waving them through. They set up the launcher at the edge of the main testing range, camouflage it with tarps, position it where it can be quickly revealed but isn't obviously visible from the main demonstration area. This is insane, Fisher mutters, checking the firing mechanisms for the 17th time. We're going to end up court-martialed. Probably, Reeves agrees. He's smoking a cigarette, hands steady, despite the fact that his career hangs on the next 48 hours, but it's the right kind of insane. Marcus doesn't participate in the conversation. He's checking the projectiles, examining each one, making absolutely certain everything will function perfectly when it matters most. They'll get one chance at this, one demonstration. One opportunity to show Roosevelt that the Ordnance Board is wrong. They spend 2 days testing and retesting, fire the launcher 17 times, make minute adjustments after each test, verify that the pattern stays consistent, load fresh projectiles, check the firing sequence, confirm the timing. By the morning of June 12th, Marcus has slept perhaps 6 hours total in the past 48. He's running on coffee and determination and the knowledge that if this fails, men like Tommy will keep dying while the Navy argues about whether forward-firing mortars are too complex. At 11:47, they hear motorcycles. The presidential motorcade approaches in a cloud of dust and ceremony flags flying, Secret Service agents scanning the terrain with professional paranoia. Reeves intercepts Commander Phillips Roosevelt's naval aide as he exits one of the staff cars. The conversation is brief and tense, involves Reeves using every ounce of respect he's earned in 20 years of service. Marcus watches from 200 yards away, unable to hear the words, but reading everything in body language. Phillips looks skeptical, then irritated, then thoughtful. He glances toward where Marcus and Fisher wait next to their camouflaged launcher. Phillips walks to Roosevelt's car, leans in through the window, speaks quietly. Marcus holds his breath. Everything depends on the next 30 seconds. If Roosevelt says no, if Phillips dismisses the whole thing, if security decides to investigate the unauthorized equipment, it's over. Career over. Project over. Hope over. Roosevelt's car turns, begins driving across the testing ground toward them. Marcus's heart hammers against his ribs. This is actually happening. The President of the United States is coming to see an unauthorized weapon demonstration by a chemist who's supposed to be studying color perception. The car stops 20 feet away. Roosevelt doesn't exit, can't exit, not easily, not with the wheelchair and the effort required and the carefully maintained fiction that the president's paralysis doesn't affect his ability to lead. But he rolls down the window, looks at Marcus with eyes that have seen a lot of desperate men with big promises, and speaks. You must be the fellow who's been causing headaches for Admiral Whitmore. Marcus's throat is suddenly dry. Sir, I'm Dr. Marcus Sullivan. I've developed a weapon system that could significantly improve our anti-submarine effectiveness. Whitmore called me yesterday, said some chemist was wasting Navy resources on a concept that's been rejected 3 times over 30 years, said I should shut you down immediately. Roosevelt's expression is unreadable, which naturally made me extremely curious about what you've built. Show me. Marcus gestures to Fisher, who pulls the tarp off the Thunderbolt launcher. 24 spigot mortars gleam in the June sunlight, angled forward, loaded and ready. Mr. President, our current anti-submarine weapons have a success rate of approximately 2%, 50 attacks per kill. The problem is sonar's blind spot. We lose contact at 300 yards and have to fire completely blind, guessing where the submarine went during those 90 seconds of invisibility. Marcus points to the launcher. This fires 24 projectiles ahead of the ship while we still have sonar contact. They land in a concentrated pattern 200 yards forward. Contact fuses mean they only explode on impact with the submarine. Misses sink silently, allowing immediate follow-up attacks. No sonar disruption. Continuous pressure on the target. Roosevelt studies the launcher with the attention of a man who genuinely understands technology and its implications. Only explode on contact, not timed detonations. Correct, sir. Silence means miss. Explosion means kill. Instant feedback for the attacking crew. Roosevelt glances at Phillips. Did you know this was possible? Phillips shifts uncomfortably. Sir, the technology has been proposed in various forms, but the Ordnance Board determined that practical implementation presents insurmountable challenges. Roosevelt's expression hardens slightly. I asked if you knew it was possible, Commander. Not what some committee decided. Silence stretches. Marcus can hear his own pulse, the wind rustling through trees at the edge of the proving ground, someone's radio playing music faintly in the distance. Roosevelt turns back to Marcus. Show me it working. Fisher hits the firing switch. The launcher erupts in a carefully choreographed sequence. Thump, 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 thump. Thump, thump. 24 projectiles ripple into the blue Maryland sky in under 3 seconds, each pair launching before the previous pair reaches apex. They arc upward, beautiful and terrible, turn over at their peak, plummet toward the target range with the inevitability of physics. Marcus watches, Roosevelt watching the projectiles. The president's face shows nothing, gives away nothing, maintains that famous inscrutability that's frustrated opponents and allies alike for a decade. The projectiles splash down in a perfect ellipse, exactly 200 yards from the launcher. Dummy charges detonate in rapid sequence. Boom, 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 boom. Water columns erupt across 140 foot, spread the pattern tight enough to bracket any submarine unlucky enough to be underneath. Then silence. The water settles. The echo fades. Everything returns to the peaceful Maryland afternoon. Roosevelt stares at the settling water for what feels like an eternity. Again, they fire a second pattern. Identical performance, identical results. Again, a third pattern. After the third demonstration, Roosevelt turns to face the Joint Chiefs, who've gathered around his car, drawn by curiosity about what's happening at the edge of the testing range. Admiral Whitmore stands among them, expression carefully neutral, but eyes burning with barely suppressed fury. Gentlemen, why don't we have this on our ships? Whitmore steps forward, spine rigid, every inch the career officer who knows how things should be done. Mr. President, the Ordnance Board conducted extensive reviews and determined that spigot mortars present unacceptable risks due to mechanical complexity and unproven reliability under combat conditions. Roosevelt's voice goes cold in a way that makes everyone within earshot stand a little straighter. Admiral Whitmore, we're losing the Atlantic. Britain has approximately 4 months of food reserves remaining. 4 months. After that, they either surrender or starve. Those are the options. He gestures toward the launcher. This man has built something that works. I watched it work 3 times in the last 5 minutes. I don't care what your board determined. I'm determining that this goes into production immediately. Is that sufficiently clear? Whitmore's face could be carved from granite. Yes, Mr. President. Roosevelt looks at Marcus. What do you call it, Sun Thunderbolt, sir? Because it's silent until it strikes. Roosevelt considers this, then shakes his head slightly. Number, too aggressive. We're not trying to frighten the enemy. We're trying to sink them quietly, efficiently before they know we're there. He pauses, thinking. Call it hedgehog. Small, unassuming, covered in spines. Step on it, and you learn your mistake too late. The name fits. Marcus nods. Hedgehog, it is, Mr. President. Production authorization comes through within 48 hours. Boeing and Chrysler receive contracts to manufacture launchers and projectiles. Priority materials allocation, expedited testing protocols. Everything that seemed impossible when the Ordnance Board said no becomes suddenly possible when the President says yes. But production is still slow, too slow. Factories have to retool, workers have to be trained, quality control protocols established, supply chains organized. The first 50 Hedgehog installations won't be ready until September, maybe October, and the war doesn't wait. June 1942, 144 Allied ships sunk. July, 96 ships. August, 108 ships. September, 98 ships. Marcus tracks the numbers obsessively, each one representing hundreds of sailors, dead or maimed or traumatized. Each one a failure of the system to move fast enough, build fast enough, deploy fast enough. Tommy's letters keep coming, each one a little shorter, a little more exhausted. We're still using depth charges, Uncle Mark. Still firing blind. Still missing. When is the new weapon ready? The boys are asking. They've heard rumors. They want to know when we get something that actually works. Marcus writes back with carefully vague reassurances about production timelines and testing protocols. He doesn't say what he's thinking, that every week of delay costs lives, that bureaucracy kills as surely as torpedoes, that he's built a weapon that could save thousands, but it's sitting in factories while men drown. October 30th, 1942. Marcus works late in his office at the Naval Research Laboratory reviewing production schedules, trying to find ways to accelerate the timeline. The numbers aren't cooperating. Even with presidential priority building complex weapon systems takes time. Captain Reeves walks in without knocking. His face is gray, his hands shake slightly. Marcus knows before Reeves speaks. He knows from the expression, from the hour, from the way Reeves can't quite meet his eyes. Mark, I just got word from Atlantic Fleet Command. The words that follow barely register. USS Reuben James, torpedoed, U-552, west of Iceland, broken half, sank in 5 minutes, 115 casualties, 44 survivors. Tommy Hayes was not among the survivors. The world narrows to a point. Marcus hears Reeves speaking, but the words are just sound, meaningless vibrations in air. Tommy can't be dead. Tommy is 19 years old. Tommy is supposed to come home, go to college, become an engineer, get married, have children. Tommy is supposed to live. Was there a hedgehog on the Reuben James Reeves's voice comes from very far away? No. First installations don't start until December. She was scheduled to receive one in January, 2 months too late. If production had started in April instead of June, if the Ordnance Board hadn't delayed, if Marcus had moved faster, pushed harder, convinced them sooner, if, the word that defines every regret, every failure, every life that ends before it should. This is not your fault, Mark. Reeves's voice cracks. You did everything you could. Marcus sweeps everything off his desk. Papers scatter, a coffee cup shatters. The sound feels satisfying like external chaos matching internal devastation. Everything. My nephew is dead because I couldn't move fast enough, because I wasted time on committees and presentations and politics while boys were drowning. He collapses into his chair, head and hands, shoulders shaking with grief that has no outlet, rage that has no target, guilt that has no absolution. Reeves leaves quietly. The door clicks shut. Marcus sits alone as afternoon becomes evening, becomes night. On his desk, among the scattered papers, Tommy's last letter. The one about hoping the new weapon arrives soon. The one about good men dying because their equipment doesn't work. Uncle Mark, please hurry. We need it now. But now is too late. Now is October 31st, and Tommy has been dead for 24 hours, and all the weapons and all the factories won't bring him back. Marcus picks up the letter, reads it one more time, folds it carefully, places it in his desk drawer with all the others. Then he goes back to work, because work is all that's left. Work, and the possibility that maybe somewhere in the Atlantic, the weapon he built will save someone else's nephew. The weapon that came too late for Tommy might arrive in time for someone else. It's not enough. It will never be enough, but it's all he has. December 1942. The first Hedgehog installations begin on Atlantic convoy escorts. 50 destroyers and destroyer escorts receive the weapon system over a 6-week period. Crews attend training sessions, learn the firing procedures, study the contact fuse mechanisms that only detonate on impact with submarine hulls. The sailors don't trust it. Marcus reads the after-action reports with growing frustration. USS Bogue encounters a submarine contact at 400 yards, has perfect sonar tracking, fires depth charges instead of using the Hedgehog mounted on her forward deck. The submarine escapes. USS Osmond Ingram detects a U-boat at optimal firing range. Captain orders traditional depth charge attack. Misses completely. Why aren't they using it? Captain Reeves sits across from Marcus in the Naval Research Laboratory office that's become more home than Marcus's actual apartment. He looks as exhausted as Marcus feels, both of them running on coffee and stubbornness and the desperate need to make Tommy's death mean something. Reeves slides another report across the desk. Read this one. USS Card, January 8th. Sonar contact range 350 yards perfect, Hedgehog firing solution. Executive officer recommends Hedgehog attack. Captain overrules orders depth charges. 0 hits. Submarine escapes, sinks a merchantman 4 hours later. Marcus reads the captain's explanation with mounting anger. Crew lacks confidence in new weapon system. Depth charges provide psychological reassurance through visible detonations. Hedgehog silence interpreted as malfunction or failure. They think silence means it's broken. Reeves lights a cigarette, hands not quite steady. They're so used to depth charges making noise, creating those massive explosions, that when the Hedgehog projectiles just splash into the water without exploding, sailors assume the weapon failed. But that's the entire point. Marcus wants to throw something. Silence means the projectiles are working exactly as designed. They sink, they wait for a submarine hull to trigger the contact fuse. If there's no explosion, it means we missed and can fire again immediately. I know that. You know that. The sailors firing the weapon don't trust it because their brains are wired to equate big explosions with success. So what do? Reeves exhales smoke, thinking. The Navy is issuing a directive next week. All commanding officers must report why they chose not to use Hedgehog when suitable firing opportunities existed. Make it uncomfortable to avoid the weapon. Force behavioral change through administrative pressure. It's not enough. Marcus stands, paces to the window. Every day they're not using it. Submarines are escaping. Ships are sinking. More Tommies are dying. Then we wait for someone to actually use it correctly and prove it works. Reeves stubs out the cigarette. Once crews see what a Hedgehog hit looks like, once word spreads that this thing actually kills submarines, adoption will accelerate. How long? Reeves shrugs. Weeks. Months. Wars don't turn on schedule, Sullivan. You know that. Marcus does know that. Doesn't make it easier. The breakthrough comes from an unexpected direction, not the Atlantic. The Pacific. May 1944. Southwest Pacific, Caroline Islands region. Japanese Submarine Squadron 7 deploys 7 I-class submarines in an early warning picket line between Truk and the Mariana Islands. Their mission is simple and vital: detect the American invasion fleet, radio warnings to Tokyo, give Japanese forces time to prepare defenses. If those submarines succeed, thousands of American Marines and sailors will die in the invasion. If they fail, the attack achieves surprise and saves lives. The submarines have to be eliminated. USS Hawthorne, a destroyer escort designated DE-635, receives Hedgehog installation in April. Her commanding officer is Lieutenant Commander Robert Hayes, 34 years old, former civil engineer from Oregon, joined the Navy after Pearl Harbor. Thinks like an engineer, not like a traditional naval officer who learned tactics from officers who learned from officers dating back to the age of sail. Hayes reads Marcus Sullivan's technical reports, all of them. Studies the mathematics, understands the geometry, grasps why firing ahead with sonar contact is categorically superior to dropping charges behind while blind. He calls his crew together on the forward deck, has them gather around the Hedgehog launcher. Gentlemen, we just received the most lethal submarine-killing weapon ever mounted on a warship. His voice carries the flat certainty of someone who's done the calculations and trusts numbers more than tradition. Most crews don't trust it because it doesn't make the big explosions they're used to. That's stupid thinking. We're not here to make noise. We're here to sink submarines. His executive officer, Lieutenant John Patterson, a cautious man who's survived this long by not taking unnecessary risks, raises his hand. Sir, the weapon hasn't been proven in combat. Perhaps we should stick with depth charges until we see how other ships perform with it. Hayes looks at Patterson like he just suggested navigating by astrology. The math proves it works, John. 60 attacks per kill with depth charges, projected 5 or 6 attacks per kill with Hedgehog. That's 10 times more effective. We're using it. Anyone who has a problem with that can request transfer. No one requests transfer. Hayes has a reputation for bringing his crew home alive. If he believes in this strange weapon with its silent misses, they'll trust him. They don't have to wait long to test that trust. May 19th, 1944, 08:43 hours, Chief Petty Officer Mike Torres, sonar operator, reports contact bearing 045, range 1,100 yards, classification definite I-class submarine, big target, fleet submarine, carries a crew of nearly 100 men. Hayes orders battle stations with the calm of someone who's been waiting for exactly this moment. The Hawthorne turns toward the contact, increases speed, closes the range, 900 yards, 700, 500. Patterson watches the range decrease traditional training, warring with trust in his captain. Sir, recommend we prepare depth charges as backup. Hayes doesn't take his eyes off the sonar display. We're using Hedgehog. Load and prepare to fire. 400 yards, 350, fire Hedgehog. Fisher's launcher design works flawlessly. 24 projectiles ripple into the Pacific sky in under 3 seconds. They arc forward, turn over, plummet toward the ocean 200 yards ahead of the Hawthorne. Splash, splash, splash. 24 distinct impacts across a 140-foot ellipse. Then silence. The crew waits. 10 seconds, 20, 30, nothing. Patterson glances at Hayes. Miss, sir. Hayes shows no reaction. Reload. Fire again. Second pattern, same result, silence. Third pattern, silence. Fourth pattern, silence. Some captains would quit now. Would declare the weapon unreliable, switch to the familiar depth charges, file a report about Hedgehog's inadequate performance. Robert Hayes is not some captains. Reload. Patterson tries again. Sir, perhaps depth charges would be more effective in this situation. Hayes finally looks at him. The reason depth charges feel more effective is because they always explode, John. Makes you feel like you're accomplishing something. But feeling productive and actually killing submarines are different things. We still have solid sonar contact. That's the advantage. We keep firing until we hit or lose contact. Load another pattern, fifth attack. The projectiles launch, arc descend. The crew has stopped watching with anticipation. This feels like failure, repeated like stubborn refusal to accept reality. Torres suddenly sits up straighter in the sonar room. Sir, I'm hearing metallic groaning, breaking up noises. Something's happening down there. 15 seconds later, the ocean erupts. Multiple explosions, 4 to 6 projectiles striking I-16 nearly simultaneously. The shockwave travels through the water, hits the Hawthorne's hull, lifts the entire stern 6 inches out of the water before dropping it back with a tremendous splash. The sound is like nothing the crew has ever heard, not the distant muffled boom of depth charges exploding somewhere below. This is immediate, violent, the sound of a pressure hull rupturing at depth of watertight compartments, failing of air compressing and heating, and men dying in ways too horrible to think about. Debris surfaces, wood fragments, oil slicks spreading across the water, a life jacket, a shoe, things that used to be inside a submarine that's now scattered across a quarter mile of ocean floor 400 feet down. The crew stands silent. A young sailor, 19 years old, same age Tommy Hayes was when he died, leans over the rail and vomits. Hayes's voice cuts through the shocked silence. Log the kill. I-16, destroyed time. 14:33 hours, sonar maintains search pattern for additional contacts. That night, Hayes sits alone in his cabin and writes a letter he's been meaning to write for 6 months. Dr. Sullivan, your weapon works. I watched it kill a submarine today. Somewhere between 4 and 6 projectiles struck the target. The explosion lifted my ship's stern clear out of the water. There's no ambiguity about what a hit looks like. God help us all, but it works exactly as you designed it. He doesn't send the letter yet. Wants to wait, see if the first kill was luck, or if this weapon really is as revolutionary as the mathematics suggest. He doesn't have to wait long. May 22nd, RO-106, sonar contact at 0915 hours, 2 Hedgehog attacks. Second attack, 3 projectile hits. Submarine destroyed. Wreckage surfaces, no survivors possible. May 23rd, RO-104, another destroyer, USS George, attacks the submarine for 2 hours. 8 depth charge attacks, all misses. The U-boat commander is good evading perfectly using depth and speed and the destroyer's blind spot to survive. George calls for assistance. Hawthorne arrives. Hayes studies the sonar picture, calculates where the submarine will be in 30 seconds, fires 1 Hedgehog pattern, 10 to 12 detonations. RO-104 ceases to exist as a functional vessel in under 2 seconds. The pressure hull collapses, flooding every compartment simultaneously, killing the crew faster than their brains can process what's happening. George's captain radios. Hawthorne, what the hell was that? Hayes keeps his response professional. New weapon system, sir. Hedgehog, anti-submarine mortar. Appears to be effective. Appears to be effective might be the understatement of the Pacific campaign. May 24th. RO-116, 3 to 5 Hedgehog hits. Submarine sinks in under 30 seconds so fast the crew doesn't have time to even attempt emergency procedures. May 26th. RO-108, 4 to 6 projectile strikes. Oil slick spreads across the surface size of 3 football fields, rainbow sheen of diesel fuel marking where 80 Japanese sailors just died, 5 submarines in 8 days. The record is unprecedented, unmatched. Nothing in naval history compares. Word spreads through the fleet faster than official communications. Radiomen gossip, officers talk. Sailors write letters home mentioning that some destroyer escort in the Pacific is killing submarines like it's target practice. Admiral Nimitz's headquarters takes notice, requests detailed after action reports, sends observers to interview Hayes and his crew. In Washington, Marcus receives a telegram with the kill count, 5 submarines, 12 days, 0 friendly casualties. Hedgehog performance exceeds all projections. He reads it 3 times, hands shaking slightly. Thinks about Tommy, about that last letter, asking when the new weapon would be ready. It works, Tommy. God help me, it actually works. But there's still 1 submarine left in Squadron 7, RO-105, and Hayes isn't done. May 30th, 2200 hours, Hawthorne receives new orders. Operation complete, return to fleet for resupply and reassignment. Hayes reads the message, looks at the chart showing RO-105's last known position. That submarine is still out there, still capable of detecting the invasion fleet, still able to radio warnings to Tokyo. He calls his senior officers to the wardroom. The small room feels crowded with 6 men, everyone tired, everyone ready to head back to port for hot food and real sleep, and maybe a few days without hunting submarines. Hayes spreads the chart across the table. Gentlemen, there's still 1 submarine from Squadron 7 unaccounted for, RO-105. Last detected here 30 hours ago, attacked unsuccessfully by 2 other destroyers. 21 separate depth charge attacks, all misses. Patterson sees where this is going. Sir, we have orders to return to the fleet. I'm aware of our orders, John. Hayes meets each officer's eyes in turn. I'm also aware that our mission is to eliminate the picket line before the invasion. We haven't eliminated it. 1 submarine remains. The communications officer, a young lieutenant named Walsh, speaks carefully. Sir, disobeying direct orders is a court-martial offense. Yes, it is. Hayes doesn't look away. It's also the right thing to do. That submarine is out there. If we leave now, if we follow orders and return to the fleet, RO-105 will detect the invasion force. We'll radio Tokyo. We'll give the Japanese time to prepare. American Marines will die because we followed orders instead of completing the mission. Silence stretches. Outside, the Pacific night is quiet except for the endless rhythm of waves against hull. Patterson speaks first. I'm with you, sir. One by one, the others nod. Some reluctantly, some immediately, all of them understanding what they're risking. Hayes turns to Walsh. Send a message to Fleet Command. Hawthorne experiencing engine trouble. Return delayed 24 hours for repairs. That's a lie, sir. Yes, it is. Hayes signs the message form. It'll be the truth if we get court-martialed. Engine trouble and command trouble amount to the same thing. Send it. May 31st, 0600 hours. 4 hours of searching. Torres sweeps the sonar in methodical patterns, listening for the distinctive signature of a submarine trying to stay quiet. 0947. Faint contact. Bearing 045. Could be their target. Hayes orders the Hawthorne toward the contact. RO-105's commander knows this destroyer is different. Word has spread even among Japanese submarine crews. The Americans have a new weapon. 5 submarines dead in days. Don't let them get close. He takes his boat deep. 400 feet, beyond the depth most destroyers can effectively target with conventional weapons. Hayes follows. Maintains sonar contact, closes the range, 500 yards, 400, 300, fire Hedgehog, the projectiles launch arc descend, the crew knows the drill now, knows what silence means, knows what explosions mean. Silence, 10 seconds, 20, 30. Torres frowns at his sonar display. Sir, I'm hearing something. Sounds like the target is changing depth, maybe trying to evade. 40 seconds, 50. Then the ocean convulses. 6 or more hedgehog projectiles strike RO 105 at 400 feet depth. The pressure at that depth means the water itself becomes a weapon, focusing the explosive force inward, turning the submarine's pressure hull into a collapsing death trap. The implosion is catastrophic. Metal screams, bulkheads fail, the submarine compresses like an aluminum can under a hydraulic press. Death comes instantly for most of the crew, mercifully fast considering the alternatives. Torres rips off his headphones. Sir, that was a kill. Definite kill. I heard the hull collapse. Debris confirms it 10 minutes later. Japanese submarine RO-105, the last member of Squadron 7, is destroyed. Patterson looks at Hayes with something like awe. 6 submarines, sir. 12 days. That's a record. Hayes nods slowly. Log it. Then set course for the fleet. We're done here. The radio crackles. Message from Admiral Spruance. Hawthorne return immediately. Await disciplinary action. Patterson winces. Court-martial, sir. Hayes shrugs. Maybe. Or maybe the Admiral understands that sometimes orders and mission completion aren't the same thing. Either way, we did what needed doing. June 3rd, 1944. Fleet headquarters somewhere in the Pacific. Hayes stands at attention before Admiral Raymond Spruance, expecting the worst, prepared to accept whatever consequences come from deliberate insubordination. Spruance looks at him for a long moment. Commander Hayes, you disobeyed direct orders. Yes, sir. You lied about mechanical problems. Yes, sir. You sank 6 Japanese submarines in 12 days using a weapon system that most of the fleet doesn't trust yet. Yes, sir. Spruance almost smiles. Congratulations, you just saved the Marianas invasion. Hayes blinks. Sir, Japanese Admiral Toyota ordered Submarine Squadron 7 to relocate after your 5th kill. Assumed the area was too dangerous. Admiral Owada, commanding their submarine force, sent a reply. Spruance reads from a decoded message. Submarine Squadron 7 has no submarines. The words hang in the air. 6 submarines, an entire early warning network. Eliminated by 1 destroyer escort with a weapon most sailors don't trust. You destroyed Japan's ability to detect our invasion fleet, Commander. The landing at Saipan achieved complete tactical surprise. Casualties were significantly lower than projected. You're not being court-martialed. You're receiving the Navy Cross. Hayes feels something unknot in his chest. Thank you, sir. One more thing. Spruance slides a folder across his desk. These are preliminary statistics on Hedgehog effectiveness. 5,174 depth charge attacks, 85 confirmed kills. 268 Hedgehog attacks, 47 confirmed kills. Your 6 kills represent 13% of all Hedgehog successes to date. Hayes opens the folder, studies the numbers. Ratio of 5.7 attacks per kill versus 60 attacks per kill for depth charges, 10 times more effective. The mathematics don't lie. Dr. Sullivan was right, sir. This weapon works. Yes, it does. Spruance stands, extends his hand. Well done, Commander. Now go teach the rest of the fleet how to use it. July 1944. Marcus receives a package from the Pacific. Inside a letter from Hayes describing each kill in technical detail, confirming that the weapon performs exactly as designed. Also included a small piece of metal twisted and scorched. Fragment from RO-106's pressure hull, the letter explains. Recovered by divers. Thought you might want proof that your design works. Marcus holds the metal fragment, feels its weight, imagines the explosion that tore it from a submarine 400 feet underwater. This piece of steel represents 80 men who died because he built something effective. Represents thousands of Allied sailors who lived because submarines couldn't escape. The moral calculus of war is simple and terrible. Kill them before they kill you. Build weapons that work better than their weapons. Win by being more effective at organized violence. Marcus never wanted to be a weapons designer. Wanted to study light and color, understand the chemistry of human perception, maybe win a Nobel Prize for pure research. War doesn't care what you wanted. War cares what you can build. August 1944. Marcus visits Boston Navy Yard for a ceremony honoring escort vessels returning from Atlantic duty. He's invited as a representative of the weapons development program, expected to shake hands and smile for photographs and accept congratulations for work he wishes he'd completed 6 months sooner. Commander Morrison approaches after the ceremony, the same Morrison who showed Marcus the blind spot problem 2.5 years ago on the deck of USS Benson. Dr. Sullivan, I owe you an apology. When you proposed firing ahead, I told you it was impossible. I was wrong. You were repeating what the Ordnance Board told you for 30 years, Commander. Being wrong in good company is forgivable. Morrison shakes his head. My job wasn't to repeat what I was told. My job was to sink submarines and bring my boys home. Your weapon helped me do that. 4 kills in 18 months. That's 4 submarines that didn't get to sink merchant ships. Probably saved hundreds of lives. How many attacks did those 4 kills take? Morrison consults a notebook. 11 Hedgehog attacks, 4 kills. Ratio of 2.75 to 1. Marcus does the math. Depth charges would have required 110 attacks for those same 4 kills. Hedgehog got the job done in 11. 99 fewer attacks means 99 fewer opportunities for submarines to escape and kill more ships. The numbers prove the concept. Now, if only the fleet would trust them. They're starting to, Morrison says. Word about Hayes and the 6 kills spread fast. Crews that were skeptical are training harder with Hedgehog. Captains who avoided it are requesting installation. It takes time, but effectiveness eventually overcomes tradition. A young sailor approaches, maybe 20 years old, nervous about interrupting officers. Begging your pardon, sirs. Dr. Sullivan Marcus turns. Yes, the sailor extends his hand. James Mitchell, sir. Sonar man, 3rd class USS Buckley. I wanted to thank you. Our ship got the Hedgehog in February. Last month we killed a U-boat on our 2nd attack. 2 attacks, 1 kill. His voice cracks slightly. My buddy told me you invented this thing. He said your nephew died before it was ready. Marcus feels the familiar weight settle in his chest. Tommy's ghost always there, always reminding him of what came too late. I'm alive because of what you built, sir. The sailor's eyes are earnest, honest. So are 200 other guys on my ship. I know it came too late for some, but it was right on time for us. Thank you. The sailor salutes, walks away before Marcus can respond. Morrison watches him go. That's why you did it, Sullivan. Not for the admirals or the politicians or the medals. For that kid. For all the kids who came home because submarines couldn't escape anymore. Marcus nods, not trusting his voice. The final statistics compiled after war's end tell the story that bureaucrats couldn't ignore. 5,174 depth charge attacks, 85 confirmed submarine kills, ratio of 60.8 attacks per kill, success rate of 1.6%, 268 Hedgehog attacks, 47 confirmed submarine kills, ratio of 5.7 attacks per kill, success rate of 17.5%, 10.9 times more effective. No submarine ever survived a direct Hedgehog hit. The contact-fused projectiles punched through pressure hulls and detonated inside confined spaces, creating explosive forces and pressure waves that no amount of German or Japanese engineering could withstand. The weapon spawned an entire family of forward-firing systems. Squid developed in late 1943, improved on Hedgehog's design with 3-barreled mortars that automatically calculated depth settings based on sonar data. It achieved 17 kills and 50 attacks, a ratio of 2.9 to 1. Limbo, introduced in the 1950s, served Royal Navy and Commonwealth navies through the Cold War, saw combat as late as the Falklands War in 1982. The American Asaroki system, entering service in the 1960s, carried homing torpedoes or nuclear depth charges to ranges of 10 miles, but traced its conceptual lineage directly to Marcus Sullivan's insistence that firing ahead while maintaining contact was superior to dropping charges behind while blind. Modern anti-submarine weapons still use the principle Marcus fought for: fire ahead, maintain contact, strike precisely. The technology evolved, the delivery systems became more sophisticated, but the fundamental insight remained unchanged. For his wartime service, Marcus receives the Medal of Freedom from President Truman in a White House ceremony he attends only because refusing would insult the office. Britain knights him for his contributions to Allied victory. Sir Marcus Sullivan. MIT grants him tenure and a research laboratory funded well enough that he never has to worry about money again. The accolades mean less than he expected. The knighthood feels like recognition for something he'd rather forget. The medal sits in a desk drawer, never displayed. What matters what he thinks about on sleepless nights for the rest of his life is the arithmetic. 47 submarines sunk, approximately 70 crew members per submarine, 3,290 enemy sailors killed by a weapon he designed. Set against that, the Allied sailors saved. If Hedgehog had been deployed 6 months earlier, if production had started in April instead of September, how many Tommy Hayeses would have come home? The calculation is impossible. Too many variables. Too many what-ifs. But Marcus runs the numbers anyway, late at night, alone in his office, trying to quantify redemption in saved lives per month of delay. The math never comes out in his favor. March 1946, Marcus attends a ceremony at Boston Navy Yard. USS Hawthorne is being decommissioned, her war service complete, her hull scarred by depth charge, near misses, and kamikaze shrapnel, but still afloat, still intact, bringing her crew home one last time. Captain Hayes, promoted twice after his 6 kills, sees Marcus in the crowd and walks over. They shake hands, 2 men who never met during the war, but whose work intersected in ways that changed naval warfare forever. Dr. Sullivan, I've wanted to meet you for 2 years. Hayes gestures toward the Hedgehog launcher still mounted on Hawthorne's forward deck, preserved for the decommissioning ceremony. That weapon saved my crew a dozen times, killed 6 submarines, brought my boys home alive. You proved it worked, Captain. I just designed it. Hayes shakes his head. No, sir. You fought for it. Fought the bureaucracy, the ordnance board, the admirals who said it was impossible. That's harder than designing it. Easier to build a weapon than to convince people to use it. They stand together looking at the launcher, this collection of steel tubes and firing mechanisms that killed 47 submarines and saved thousands of lives and came too too late to save the one life Marcus cared about most. I heard about your nephew, Hayes says quietly. I'm sorry he didn't get to see this, didn't get to know his uncle's weapon worked. Marcus swallows against the tightness in his throat. Tommy would have liked knowing it saved lives. That matters more than revenge. It saved mine. Hayes extends his hand again. Thank you, Dr. Sullivan, for not giving up when they told you no. Marcus returns to MIT in the fall of 1946. Returns to teaching photochemistry, to studying the interaction of light and matter, to the pure research he loved before the war interrupted everything. Students ask occasionally about his weapons work. He answers, briefly provides the basic facts, redirects conversation to color perception and chemical reactions and the science that makes sense in ways that war never will. One student, spring semester 1947, asks the question that cuts deepest. Professor Sullivan, how does it feel to invent a weapon that killed thousands? Marcus pauses at the chalkboard, chalk suspended in air, considering how to answer honestly without revealing how much the question costs him. I invented a weapon that saved tens of thousands. He turns to face the class, meets the students' eyes. The men who died were trying to starve Britain into surrender, trying to cut America's supply lines, trying to kill our sailors. Would it have been more moral to let them succeed? But you're a scientist. Don't you believe in peace? I believe in defending the innocent. Sometimes that requires weapons. Sometimes it requires fighting your own side's bureaucracy to deploy those weapons. Both are wars worth fighting. The student nods satisfied, or at least understanding that some questions don't have simple answers. But the question haunts Marcus, always has, probably always will. The weight of 3,290 enemy sailors killed, the impossibility of quantifying Allied sailors saved, the knowledge that if he'd moved faster, convinced them sooner, built it 6 months earlier, Tommy Hayes might have come home. The arithmetic of war permits no forgiveness, only the grim accounting of lives taken versus lives saved, with interest compounding in nightmares. Marcus Sullivan lives until April 1998, 94 years old, long enough to see the Cold War end, the Soviet Union collapse, technologies emerge that would have seemed like magic to the boy mixing chemicals in Jimmy Paulson's attic. Long enough to receive letters from sailors he never met, men who served on escorts equipped with hedgehog men who came home because submarines couldn't escape anymore. He keeps every letter, reads them sometimes when the guilt gets too heavy, when he needs reminding that the weapon worked, that it saved lives, that Tommy's death wasn't completely meaningless. His obituary in the New York Times runs 600 words, mentions his pioneering work in photochemistry, his tenure at MIT, his wartime contributions to anti-submarine warfare, lists his honors, his publications, his surviving colleagues who considered him a friend. It doesn't mention Tommy Hayes, doesn't talk about the nephew who died 2 months before the weapon that might have saved him reached the fleet. Doesn't capture the guilt Marcus carried for 56 years, the knowledge that he built something important but not quite fast enough. History remembers the hedgehog, remembers the statistics. 60 attacks per kill reduced to 5 attacks per kill, 47 submarines destroyed, 10 times more effective than the weapon it replaced. History remembers Robert Hayes and his unprecedented 6 kills in 12 days, a record that stands unmatched 80 years later. History forgets the 1,000 small delays that turned invention into deployment, forgets the bureaucrats who said impossible when they meant difficult, forgets the committees that met and discussed and tabled and scheduled follow-up meetings while men drowned in the Atlantic. History forgets the Tommy Hayeses, the 19-year-olds who went to war with equipment that didn't work, who died waiting for better weapons to arrive, who became statistics and calculations about acceptable loss rates and production timelines. Marcus understood what history forgets. That impossible is just another word for hasn't been done yet. That bureaucracy kills as surely as enemy action. That sometimes the most important fight isn't against the enemy across the ocean, but against the institutional inertia on your own side. They told him his idea had been rejected 3 times over 30 years, told him even God Almighty couldn't get a spigot mortar approved by the Ordnance Board, told him to stop wasting time and resources on concepts the experts had already dismissed. He built it anyway, crashed the president's inspection tour with an unauthorized demonstration, proved them wrong with mathematics and physics, and stubborn refusal to accept that good enough was acceptable when better was possible. The Atlantic convoys survived. Britain didn't starve. American sailors came home because submarines couldn't escape weapons that actually worked. That's Marcus Sullivan's legacy, not the knighthood or the Medal of Freedom or the academic honors, not the 600-word obituary in the Times, the lives saved, the submarines killed. The proof that one person sufficiently stubborn, sufficiently certain, sufficiently willing to fight impossible odds and entrenched opposition can change the course of history, even if it comes too late to save the people you love most. especially then, because the greatest tragedy isn't failing to build something that works. The greatest tragedy is building it perfectly, but 6 months too late. Building it brilliantly, but after the person you built it for is already dead. Marcus Sullivan died knowing his weapon worked, died knowing it saved thousands of lives, died knowing he'd proven the Ordnance Board wrong and changed naval warfare forever. He also died knowing that every morning for 56 years, the first thought upon waking was the same calculation. If production had started in April, if Roosevelt had approved it in March, if the Ordnance Board had said yes in February, if, the word that defines regret, the word that turns success into failure, the word that means you won the war but lost the battle that mattered most. Tommy Hayes was 19 years old when USS Reuben James broke in half and sank in 5 minutes. He died doing his job hunting submarines with weapons that failed 98% of the time, waiting for the new weapon his uncle promised was coming. It came 2 months too late. And that, more than any statistic about submarines killed or sailors saved, is the truth Marcus Sullivan carried to his grave. You can build the perfect weapon. You can prove the impossible possible. You can change history, but you can't change the past. You can only honor it by making sure the weapon that came too late for one nephew arrives in time for someone else's, and hope in whatever darkness waits beyond the last breath that somehow counts as enough.